welcome to the show.
Welcome, come on in. I tagged you on my new favorite song.
You did.
I love that song. I love it even more. Just to see Arnold Schwarzenegger sing I Want to Dance with Someone is fantastic.
I would like to thank you for putting that in my brain.
You're welcome.
All right, Brent, do you have a fantastic intro? Because that's your thing.
I have a decent intro. I kept working on it, but...
Did you overthink it?
Well, he's very dynamic, so it's really hard to write something concise about Sir James. So this is what I came up with. You be the judge.
You go.
All right. Out of Salem, Oregon, this band has released 834 albums. With original songs borrowing inspiration from folk, punk, metal, and experimental noise. Along with songwriting, the leader of this band is an educator and author. Welcome, Sir James of Masonic Block.
Wow, that was quite the intro. Thank you.
I think that was really good.
That was really good.
Only took 45 edits.
So,
I'm ready to get into it, man.
Well, then launch.
Okay.
Launch.
How about it?
I've got the first question for you, Sir James.
Okay.
As I said in the terrific intro, you have a plethora of things that you engage in. Have you noticed any crossover from your fans being educators, band, or book-wise? Is there a big crossover, or is it like really separate? What's that fan base look like?
The fan base is all kinds of people, all stripes. I have noticed the more that I've been doing the history professor thing that I've come across a lot of other people who are in higher ed that are also musicians. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but there is a certain level of sort of a misfit attitude among certain types that lends itself to sort of a punk rock attitude. In fact, the most recent fellow history professor I just came across that I met last week, I guess lectured to his class. And turns out he is also a guitar player and has a band and all this kind of stuff. So I'm continuing to find similarities there. And in fact, I don't know if either of you are familiar with like the 80s era. They're still around, but they're really associated with the 80s, like electronic pop kind of stuff, Information Society. But actually their bass player is a professor at another college about a half hour from where I'm sitting right now, and he and I have talked, and his name's James Cassidy. He's the bass player for Information Society, and kind of the same thing. I was surprised. If you remember that 80s song, it has the Leonard Nimoy Pure Energy. Dun dun.
Yeah.
Dun,
oh,
dun.
I remember the name of the band.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to come across people like that.
Basically, your fan base is quite large. Is that what you're telling me?
Diverse. I don't know how diverse it is. It's like 4 very different people.
And they don't talk to each other.
No.
They don't know they exist.
One only likes the early stuff. One only likes the recent stuff. The other 2 likes all of it.
So I'm going to ask you before I ask the question, how do I pronounce the name? I'm going to butcher this. Garugahu? No. Wait. How do I pronounce that so I don't butcher it?
No, that's fair. It's Giergahu.
Okay. So that's the first. Let's talk about Giergahu.
Sure.
That is an all music track. I really, really liked a lot of the sweet little guitar riffs in it. It had a great breakdown. What was the process behind that song?
I wanted to share that with you guys because that's a little bit of an exception to the rule. I so often write the songs entirely myself, and that was just a jam that me and my bandmates came up with one day on the fly during rehearsal. We literally had a fight about why am I writing all the songs, and in response I'm like, why don't you guys write any? and it was a bit of that, and things were feeling a bit stale. Things were going really well.
You're like shots fired.
A little bit, but I didn't know it was going to infuse the sort of inspiration for the music, but that's exactly what happened. We had I don't want to overstate it, but a little bit of a conflict during band practice, and I was just like, well, why don't we do what other bands do, where we just jam and we come up with a song? Why don't we do that? And it's kind of like, well, that's not really how we tend to do things. And I came up with the bass line. I was playing bass at the moment, so I was like, well, I'm just going to start playing. Let's just jam. And that song came out of it in that session. And we kind of found we let it go in whatever direction it wanted to go organically. It kind of like did this up and down thing. And after going through it a few times, it just kind of wrote itself between the three of us. It's just guitar, bass, and drums. And it felt like we were very much on the same page of making something different for us and new. And it was great. So it's a special song because it was 100% collaborative. It wasn't me coming in and being like, I have this song and you're going to learn it. And things like that. It was really like everybody just sort of started playing. And it's fantastic. And then not long after that, we were playing a club and they were like, you want us to record the set? We were like, sure. And so that's the track. It was just at a little show we did. We didn't even know if it was going to make it to an album at any point, but we really liked it. So we ended up eventually releasing it.
I like this song. And I was really excited about hearing this song because with your stuff, I've always wondered, okay, how does he pull off 85,000 guitars live? Because you have a bunch of tracks, and
Oftentimes, yeah.
And it's really interesting. So at this point, especially if you're a three-piece, which you were talking about earlier, you have to pick and choose. You just can't go, I'm going to play all the parts. Maybe if you're an octopus, you can do that. But you need to be an octopus with fingers. But we won't go into that right now. It was awesome.
Anybody who is stoned listening to this has just completely lost their minds. Go ahead.
Oh, man. That's funny. So it was awesome to hear it live. I really liked that. I thought it sounded good for live. I mean, you were able to get the crowd in there.
Mm-hmm.
I heard all the parts really well. I love the tone of the drums and the clear guitar part of this song was like crystal clear. So
it was really nice.
It was really good. And then the end, it got more aggressive towards the end. I really like that. So how recent is this recording? And would you speak about the process of preparing your band for a live show?
Well, that's two very different questions. So
yeah.
It's not a recent song. This made it onto, I think, the third album, and that's a long time ago now. So we're talking somewhere early mid 2000s on the Fathom album, as it's called. And in terms of what was your question about preparing live?
Yeah, because you've had a few versions of the band, right? Different versions.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So when you're transitioning to a new band, what does that process look like other than whining that you're the only songwriter?
Painful. And I'm not always the only songwriter. It's just that it's just often worked out that way. And some bandmates have been songwriters. They just haven't necessarily been as prolific or whatever. There's that Pearl Jam 20 documentary, which I think is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And Eddie Vedder talks about anytime you change a drummer, it's like having a heart transplant. I think that's the perfect analogy. The drummer is always the most difficult person to replace, kind of regardless of talent, regardless of intellect, there's all that stuff too. But just the drums kind of are the heart of the band, especially when you play live. And that's the most difficult sort of part of it. But at that time, and really until relatively recently, having a good live aspect was always a priority. No matter how much we wanted, the songs and the albums to sound good and stuff like that, it was always important to us that things sound good live. And even if there's going to be a difference between a studio version, maybe it's going to have more guitar overdubs and things like that, we always wanted it to be able to translate to being a little bit simpler live, but maintain its energy and maybe have a different sort of character. So that was always sort of a priority for us.
Brett, what was the second part of that question you asked? That had nothing to do with the first part. That was very different. That you tried to sneak in on us. No, it's fine. It's fine.
I just know that he has a pretty big arsenal of music. And so when you're condensing 384 albums, down to, 15 to 20 songs.
Oh.
That's got to be hard. And I was talking to, just kind of asking, what's your process of getting a new band ready for that? And you said painful, and that you don't like drummers.
Well,
no, Brent, that's just you, man. That's just you.
In some ways, I am a drummer. I actually started out on drums before I ever kind of taught myself how to play guitar or write songs. I was a drummer first. Mm-hmm. I think that helps in the sense that I've always had a sort of innate sense of rhythm. I noticed that not all singer-songwriters do. Drummers are a weird bunch, though. They really, really are. Not to say that they're all the same, because they're definitely not. They're all just weird. They're weird in different ways. But yeah, that's always hard. Basically, I have to figure out, because I'll have a batch of songs that I want to play, but maybe it's a song that somebody in the band can't play. Maybe the time signature is too weird, or maybe there's a feel change that's just they can't quite grasp. And so I need to utilize the talents of the people I have around me and kind of pick the best songs that's appropriate for who I'm playing with. And I say this as somebody I'm not a technically proficient musician at all. I'm ridiculously sloppy in my writing and in my playing. So I'm not denigrating my bandmates whatsoever. Most of them are kind of beyond me in terms of technical ability. And that's what I benefit from, is that I associate myself with really good players who they might not write much, but where their talent is a high level of playing ability, which brings my abilities up. Because otherwise I'd be playing a G chord and nothing else.
They make you look good. They make you look good. Yeah, totally. And who's all in the band now?
I have I think I put it this way before, it's sort of a revolving door of members, but I still have a core. I'd say that the two main guys over the past several years have been Martin Rush on bass and Matt Stevens on drums. I'm often the only guitar player when we play live. I don't want it to be that way. We haven't played in a while. Last time we played live, I made sure to have a lead guitar player. I'm not much of a lead player at all. I'm much more of this song-oriented rhythm. I might fake a solo, but I'm always faking it. But those two guys are sort of the core. Yeah, that's been for the past decade or so. But we always add people as needed. Like, we have some songs on an album from a few albums ago. For example, that had a violin. We brought in Arwen Morgan, who was this amazing violinist out of Seattle, and also Mike Connor, who's an incredible saxophone player. So I always call people up if it's like, okay, this song needs, this one thing. And then once I can figure out what that one thing is, I'll call somebody who can find, how to hit the spot.